All right, so sorry for all the confusion. My name is Nonye, and I am a real estate tutoress. I'm a licensed broker here in Illinois as well as a licensed instructor. So, if you've been following this channel, what I do here is I bring you the best tips and tools to getting your real estate license. I also answer any questions you may have about the process. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe, as that helps me grow the channel and also help other people who are in your shoes trying to get their license. So in today's course, we're going to be talking about the appraisal process. And in the appraisal process, we need to know certain things. First, we need to understand what an appraisal is, who performs an appraisal, what is a CMA, and then the third thing is the appraisal approach that our appraisers use. So we need to know those things for the examination. So, first things first, what is an appraisal? An appraisal, as it says on the screen, an estimate of value. So, one thing to remember about the appraisal, you're not doing the appraisal as an agent, but the appraisal, if they ask you any questions about value, you're thinking appraisal. Like if someone is trying to find the value of a property, then you're thinking appraisal. If they use the word estimate, then it's not the appraisal. But when you're getting an opinion of the value, then we're talking about the actual appraisal. Um, I am using a new system today, and I just wanted to say that in the process of doing this, it lost connection with my camera. And so I probably will have to continue without one until I figure out why that happened. So just bear with me here. And then going back to the appraisal, who performs the appraisal? Now, the appraisal is performed by a licensed or a certified appraiser, and these appraisers are licensed on the state level. So, kind of the same way we have state licenses, right? Appraisers also have they also have state licenses as well, and there are three levels. Once they get their license, they are trainees. They're doing their apprenticeship. Okay. And then once they graduate from the apprenticeship, usually about 2 years or so, then they become the certified residential real estate appraiser. And once they complete that and have so many hours under their belt and some experience, they can then take the additional course to become a general real estate appraiser. So, as it shows on the screen there, the trainees' reports always have to be signed off by someone who's certified. So, either a certified residential or a certified general appraiser. All right. And if you notice between the residential and general, the name there, residential, the word there, residential, helps you know that this person can only appraise residential properties. So if you have a client who wants to figure out the value of a commercial property, you're going to be looking for a general residential appraiser, not a residential. Sorry, you're going to be looking for a general real estate appraiser, not a residential real estate appraiser. And also, on the bottom of the screen there, I put that appraisal records are kept for 5 years. Now, remember 5 years. All records in real estate are kept for 5 years. So your real estate transaction records are kept for 5 years. Earnest money deposits are kept for 5 years. Anything to do with the transaction from our end as real estate agents, we keep for 5 years. And same thing for appraisers. So just remember 5 years across the board, we keep all records for 5 years. Okay. So the next thing about appraisers is, sorry, the next subject we'll talk about here is the CMA. A comparative market analysis. This is what we as real estate agents do. So we perform a CMA. Now, a CMA is us helping our buyer or seller client determine the estimated value of property. So if you notice here, it's an estimate. when I was talking about what an appraisal is, I told you that with the appraisal, it's not an estimate, it's the actual value. So that's going to help you with the difference on the exam. If they're asking you for an estimate, then a broker can give the estimate. But if they want the actual value, then that's done by an appraiser. Okay, so we use some of the same techniques that an appraiser uses, but because we don't have their same level of expertise and some of the tools that they have, our reports are not appraisals. Sorry. Okay, our reports are not appraisals. So we will be looking at similar properties to our subject property. Now, please don't, on the exam, for example, don't confuse what the subject property is. The subject property is the one that we're trying to find the value of. And then what we're doing is looking at the value of other properties that have sold in the area to help us find the value of our subject property. We're looking for properties that are about the same size. We're looking for properties that are in the same location and hopefully have the same type of amenities, such as if my subject property is a condo, I'm looking for condos and I'm comparing my subject property with condos. I'm not comparing my condo property with a single family home or a multi unit building. If my condo is 2 bed, 2 bath, I want to make sure I'm looking also for 2 bed, 2 bath. If I can't find 2 bed, 2 bath, then I can look for others that are close, maybe a 2 bed, 1 bath, and then make adjustments for the differences. All right. And according to the law here in Illinois, we are supposed to state on our CMAs that our reports are not appraisals. Okay, they're not appraisal reports, but they are just an estimate of value. And in some reports too, they don't give you the actual value because we're not appraisers, so they give you a range. We give our buyers like a range. I think it's between here and here, so they can decide how they want to price the property, with our help. So I just wanted to sneak in here for anyone who's joined. I apologize. I'm trying this new system and somehow my camera got disconnected and I would probably have to close and restart, and I don't know what that's going to look like. So I'm just going to keep it this way and hopefully next time I'll figure out what happened. But I switched to this program and I'm just trying it out because with the Zoom, there was somewhat of a lag. And so I'm checking to see if this is a better experience. So please let me know in the chat whenever you watch this if this is a better setup than going through Zoom. Okay, so now on the screen, we're talking about what types of properties do we look for. So we have our subject property, and then we're going to be looking on the market to find properties that are currently for sale. So the active properties. We're also going to be looking for things that are under contract or contingent. We're going to be looking for those that expired. So they were on the market for sale, but they didn't sell. And then finally, we're going to be looking for things that have already sold. So the acronym, they're ACEs, your actives, your contingent, your expireds, and your solds. And what you want to do is make sure that they are, remember on the previous slide, size, location, and amenities. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for things that are close in size, location, and amenities in these 4 categories that I'm talking about here. So actives, contingents, expireds, and solds. Okay. And like I said earlier, you may not get the exact replica, but you can make adjustments. For example, one thing may have a garage, the other doesn't have a garage, and stuff like that. For the purpose of the exam, and we're going to do an example real briefly. For the purpose of the exam, if there are any adjustments to be made, they will give you a value to use. They will give you, for example, one has a garage, one doesn't have a garage. They will give you the value of the garage to use. On this final slide, it's just a reminder time of the sale is important. So we also want to look for things that have sold recently, hopefully in the last 3 months. If you can't find anything in the last 3 months, then you could extend to 6 months. If you can't find anything in the last 6 months, then you can go as far as a year or so. So you're expanding your location and your time frame and trying to find the closest to your subject property. All right. And as we go through this, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat as well. All right, so then these are some factors affecting real estate value. These are in your appraisal chapter, depending on the book that you're using. We don't have time to go through all of them in this lesson today, but the main ones I wanted to highlight that you need to understand would be highest and best use, understand progression and regression, also understand how supply and demand affect the value of real estate. Okay. So supply and demand affects the value of anything in general, right? So you can even use examples like the cost of goods to help you understand how price is of value is affected by supply and demand. For example, when everything shut down in 2020 and everyone was looking for toilet paper, what happened to the price of toilet paper? Price of toilet paper went up because it became a scarce commodity. The demand went up and supply was limited. And so people were valuing it more and were willing to pay way more for toilet paper than they were um, at that point for previously, because the demand was really really high. Okay, so same thing with real estate. When there's a huge demand like what was happening in 2021 and the supply was not catching up with the demand, what happened to the value of homes? The values went up. So those types of things, also be able to explain them in your own words. For me, I find that when you're able to at least explain it a little bit, it means that you've understood the concept. One of the other ones I told you to remember, progression and regression. So progress, right? So kind of going forward, and then regress, you're going backwards. So if you think of progression and value, so forward, like something is getting better, right? So the value of a home is better because of where it's located. So this is a small house that's around, for example, $1 million homes. And because it's around $1 million homes, its value is going up, versus regression, whereby the value of a home is reducing because of the other homes around it. So maybe this is $1 million home around $250,000 homes. And so because the area doesn't support its value, the owner would probably have to sell it for less. Okay, so let me go over it again. Highest and best use, progression, regression, supply and demand. Those are the main ones to remember out of this list. But of course, be sure to go over all of these in your textbook and have an idea of what they mean and how they affect the value of real estate. Okay, these are some of the things that appraisers will look for when they are appraising a property. Now, the three approaches, the three appraisal approaches, we have the sales comparison approach, we have the cost approach, and we also have the income approach. So let's start with the sales approach. The sales approach is very similar to the CMA that we just talked about, that's done by real estate agents. Here, the appraiser is comparing the subject property or the property that's being appraised with things in the community that have recently sold. Okay. And as you see there in the bullet points, they adjust for differences. And the second bullet point, they only adjust the value of the comp. Because remember, we know the value of the comp. We're trying to use that value to find our value. If the comparable property is inferior, meaning our subject property is better, that means our subject property's value will be more. Okay, so we want to add to the price. So for example, my house is better than your house. your house sold for 250. So my house is going to sell for more than your house sold for. Okay? So let's say that my house has a garage, yours doesn't have a garage. So yours sold for 250, then mine is going to sell for 250 plus whatever I feel the value of the garage is. Okay? So if the comp is poorer, we add. And then the opposite is the same. It happens if the comp is superior or better. So let's say your house is better than my house. Your house sold for 250, and that means my house is probably going to sell for less than 250. So let's say you have the garage and I don't. So now we're going to subtract what we think is the value of the garage to help me find the value of my house. Okay, so if the comp is better, the comparable is better, we subtract. So CPA and CBS are some of the acronyms that can help you in this math calculation. And like I said earlier, if you ever get a question here where you have to figure out the value of a home using the sales approach, they will give you the numbers to work with. So you don't have to worry about what the value of a garage is, or the value of a fireplace, or the value of an extra bedroom. So let's do a quick example here. A house being appraised is similar to one that sold for $243,000. One difference is that the house being appraised has an extra bathroom valued at $7,000. Another difference is that the comp has a garage valued at $11,000, while the subject property has no garage. What is the appraised value of the subject property? Okay, so the one that sold for 243. So that's our starting point. Now the house being appraised has an extra bathroom, so it's better than the comp. So that means we're going to add, right? And then the other thing it says is the comp has a garage, but we don't have a garage. So the comp is better, so we're going to subtract. So to find our answer, we would have to add 7,000 and subtract 11,000. So let me say that again. The comp is 243. Our property has an extra bathroom. So ours is better. So we're going to add 7,000 because ours is better. So it has more value. So we're going to add. However, they have a garage and we don't. So that means theirs is better. So we're going to have to subtract. Okay. And so we're going to add 7 and subtract 11. And that's going to give us 239,000 as our value. All right. And this will be here afterwards. So you can always come back and go over this math again, pause it, see if you can solve it, and make sure you understand the concept. And you can go back to the slide about CPA and CBS so that you're able to understand if the comp is poorer, we add. If the comp is better, we subtract. And whatever value we get is the value of our subject property. Okay. And then, oh, my camera is back on. Whew. All right. Thank you. Sorry, guys. I was trying something new today and for some reason I lost my camera. So I've been able to figure it out. Okay. Awesome. But now it's kind of in the way. So I'll have to figure that out too. All right. So let's go on to the next method, which is the cost approach. So now with the cost approach, what we're doing is the value of the property is based off of the cost of reconstructing that property, and then also the value of the land. So when an appraiser is using the cost approach, what they will be doing is figuring out what the value of the land is. So that's our first step. What's the value? What's the value of the land? Okay, that's the first thing. Then the second thing is we need to figure out the cost to rebuild that property from scratch. Okay. The cost of the building and the improvements. Okay. So the house itself, if we were going to construct that house again from scratch, what would it be like? Okay, so that's what we're looking at for. Number three, we need to figure out any depreciation. So let's say this house was built in 2000. So that's 22 years ago. So we're going to be figuring out, okay, it was built 22 years ago. How much has it depreciated since that time? Have we done any rehabs to it since then? Or is this the same structure? So those are things that will be calculated. And then once we subtract this the depreciated value, we add that number to the value of the land. So let me say that again. So step one, we get the value of the land. Step two, the cost of construction. Step three, we estimate depreciation. So in step four, we're subtracting what our depreciation is from from number two, which is our cost of construction. Okay. So let's say it's going to cost us 500,000 to construct, but then it's depreciated by 300,000. So we're going to subtract those two numbers. And then whatever we get from step four, we're going to add that to number one, which is the value of our land. And that gives us the value of the entire real estate. Okay. Now, for the purpose of this exam, the value of land does not depreciate in value. Please remember that and make a note of that. Land does not depreciate in value. So anytime you hear about depreciation, you remember that land does not depreciate. So you're only calculating depreciation based off of the improvements or the building, okay, not the full real estate. So this kind of takes us back to the definition of real estate and real property, okay? So real estate is land plus the improvements, right? So when in time we are figuring out depreciation, we want to subtract the value of the land from the improvements. And that then gives us our that then we can calculate the cost approach from there. Okay? Because land does not depreciate in value. So that is your cost approach essentially. And then we'll talk about the use. So cost approach is best used for special purpose buildings, schools, stadiums, museums, government buildings, essentially things that aren't often sold. Okay. So those are the ones that will use this cost approach. So for example, yeah, like on the screen there, even like churches or other places of worship, they will also be using this cost approach. Right? And then I put down there cost of the structure minus depreciation plus the value of the land will give you the properties value. Okay. I had it on the slide, but I didn't expressly mention it. For the sales approach, it's best used for, see there on the bottom of the screen, it's best used for residential properties. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure I point that out to you all. It's best used for residential properties. Some other things to know about the cost approach. With the cost approach, there are two ways that we can determine the cost of the construction. Okay, one is through reproduction, the other is through replacement. Reproduction, we're creating the same replica building. For example, if it's a cathedral or maybe a museum that was built in the 1800s, that they have like the stones, the hand carved wood, and all of those things, we would be estimating the value of doing that from scratch in today's time versus replacement, which is where we are just using other types of material. So today's material for our construction, as opposed to the stones and things like that that were used way back in the day. All right. Hope that makes sense. So replacement is we're doing not the exact reproduction, but a replica. So we're using, instead of using bricks, maybe we'll use siding today. Or instead of using hardwood floors, maybe we would use like the laminate stuff that looks kind of like hardwood. Okay. So that would be an example of that. And then the other thing with the replacement versus reproduction cost is how we measure the cost. So we could either measure the cost by square footage, units in place, or quantity survey method. So square footage is, for example, we might say that this building is going to cost us $12 per square feet to reproduce. And so if it's, for example, well, let's say $10 per square footage. So if we are building something that is 5,000 square feet, we would then multiply 10 by 5,000. Okay. Units in place. This would be if, for example, I'm doing maybe a 20 unit building. How much is the cost of one building? And then multiply that by 20. Then the final one there, quantity survey method. This is essentially the actual cost of material. So how many 2x2s do I need? How many 4x4s do I need? How many doors do we need? How many light fixtures do we need? How many doorknobs? How many light switches? How much electrical wiring do we need? So we're actually getting the not a summary, but the actual number of items. Okay. And for this one, you may need to ask an architect to help you figure out how much you need based on the floor plan, the blueprint of that building. Okay. All right. So that is your cost approach. The final thing that we're going to talk about with cost approach is depreciation or deterioration. We already talked about the fact that it's going to depreciate over time, right? So think about it. You buy something brand new today, it's brand new today. You drive it for a week, it's beginning to, depreciate and it doesn't look brand new anymore. So, same thing with your house. Over time, it begins to depreciate. Now, there are four types of depreciation I'm going to talk about here. The three of them are deterioration, and then the last one is like a straight line depreciation. So these, please remember for the exam. First one on the screen there is your physical deterioration. This is your normal wear and tear. So you're living in the house, it has carpet, and then the carpet is going to get old because of like where there's high traffic. That's normal wear and tear. Or around your doorknobs and light switches, you're noticing that the paint around there is kind of not as shiny as other places. So that's your normal wear and tear. You may need to repaint the house, replace the doorknobs or replace the door, those types of things. Now, physical deterioration can be curable or incurable. Curable if financially it makes sense, it's economically feasible. If I do a quick paint job of my unit, it's going to help with my value. Versus if I just leave it dirty and with like, let's say there are drawings on the wall from kids and things like that, and I don't do any of that. People come in and see it and they're like, ooh, this house doesn't look good. They don't care that I have a brand new kitchen, but they're just going to be fixated on that wall that needs to be painted. And that's going to reduce my value. But if I just paint that wall, then we're good. Okay. So those are some things to keep in mind. So it's curable when it's just a quick fix and it will help with my property's value. The opposite then will be incurable. If, let's say, my roof is falling apart, okay, and if I replace the roof, it's not going to help with my property's value, then maybe I'll just sell as it is and let someone else come replace the roof and enjoy the property. So maybe I'll just count my losses and sell for a little less, because even if I fix the roof, it's not going to increase my value by that much. Okay. I'm not saying here that refixing the roof will not help. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just using that as an example. Right. So curable versus incurable. Please note that physical deterioration is curable or incurable just based on the um, nature of the deterioration. Functional obsolescence. With functional obsolescence, this is something about the building that people just don't like. And because of that, they are essentially reducing my property's value. For example, let's say I'm in Chicago, right? In Chicago, you see a lot of people that have central air. Well, maybe my house does not have central air. So that's going to be functional obsolescence because people are like, ugh, now we have to worry about window units or figuring out how to install central air to this home. So they may want to pay less because there's no central air. So that's one thing to think about. Another example could be maybe we have a one car garage for this lovely 4 bedroom, 3 bath house. Okay. 4 bed, 3 bath, one car garage. For someone, that would be functional obsolescence because they feel like a house that size should have more than a one car garage. Okay. Now, if you notice there, it doesn't mean it makes sense. It just means that a certain attribute of the property is no longer desirable. A 4 bed, 1 bath house or condo or apartment, that's also functional obsolescence because you have a lot of people and just one bathroom. There was a time that wasn't an issue, but now it is an issue. And again, functional obsolescence can be curable or incurable just depending on the cost. Is it easy for me to add an additional bathroom to make my 4 bed, 1 bath house worth more to someone else? If it's not, then I would just hold off on it. Okay. Now, the next one, external obsolescence. Please remember this one is also called economic obsolescence. Now, the word external helps you realize that this is not something that happens in the house. This is something outside of the house. So, external obsolescence is something outside the home that's causing my property value to go down. And because it's outside my home, I have nothing to do with it. I have no control over it. And so it is always, always incurable. So there's there on your screen. What does that mean? Or let me give you an example rather. Let's say that you're living in your house, it's a nice area, you've loved it, the values are going up, but then all of a sudden you hear that the government is, let's say the airport is like a few miles away. But the government wants to extend the airport and make the airport larger. And so now the airport is going to be closer to your house. So you're going to be dealing with airport noise and all of that. That's outside of your control. You go to all the meetings and you ask them not to do it, but they don't listen to you. And so it becomes an ordinance. And now they're beginning to do construction. So that's something outside your control. It's going to negatively affect your value. Or let's say that they decide to build a highway by you, or let's say the government decides to buy one of the homes by you and make it a halfway house for people who are coming out of jail and reintegrating with society. So things like that are outside of your personal control, and so that will fall under external obsolescence. Okay. So on the exam, if they give you an example of some sort of deterioration and ask you what type of deterioration is this, you want to be able to figure out, okay, is this physical, is this functional, or is this external? Okay. It will be external if it's something outside of the home. It will be functional if it is a feature of the house. For example, the layout of the house is just bad. And then physical wear and tear, just think about, let's say it needs a paint job, or the patio or the deck needs to be repainted. Um, just like minor repairs here and there that need to be done in the home would then be physical wear and tear. Okay. All right. Finally, now our income approach. All right. So far we've talked about the sales approach. Then we talked about the cost approach, which is what we're just doing right now. And then now we're talking about the income approach. With the income approach, this is used for properties that essentially produce income. So investment properties, shopping complexes, strip malls, multi-unit buildings, rental apartments, rental houses. Okay, those will all fall under this category. So, first things first, we want to essentially what we're doing before we start actually is the value, the income from the property determines the value of the property. That's really the income approach. The income that's being produced at that property determines the value. So, first things first, we need to figure out what our income is. Gross income. How much are we getting in from rents, from parking, from laundry, from vending machines, from maintenance fees, whatever you're getting. Okay, so you calculate those first. Then step two is we always deduct for vacancies. Now, this is a conservative way of figuring out our income because over time, your rental property will, for the most part, not be 100% occupied. So you want to figure out, okay, what's my vacancy rate? And some people do 4%, some people do 6%, 7%. So investors just pick a number. Okay. So they deduct the allowance for vacancies from their gross income, and that gives them the effective gross income. I have an example on the next, like shortly. So I'll walk you through a quick example. A third, we subtract all our expenses. So your taxes, maybe you have a property management company that manages the building for you, utilities, water, light, gas, whatever, lawn care, snow removal, all those things will fall under expenses. So we subtract our expenses from our income, and that gives us our net operating income. Okay. So you always work with your net operating income, not your gross income, right? Step four, when we know our NOI, our net operating income, we also need to figure out what the rate of return is. Now, investors have a rate of return they want when they are um, investing in real estate. It depends on the investor. What the appraiser will do is the appraiser will look in that community at other properties that have sold to see what the average rate of return is. And how do they calculate that rate of return? The formula on your screen. The net operating income divided by the value of that property. Okay? So the property that they're looking at sold for, let's say, 300,000, and they find out what the operating income is, then they do this math to help them find the rate of return. So let's say the appraiser has done that and the appraiser has picked the rate of return. Now we would work this formula backwards and help us figure out what the value is. So here, our rate would be NOI divided by value. Okay, what I just showed you on the previous screen. So if we wanted to find the value, the third one, it would be the NOI divided by the rate. Okay, so then let's go back to the slide with number 5. And so we'll be using that last formula to help us find the value of the property. So we found the NOI, we found the rate that we want to use. And so then with those two numbers, we can find the value of the property. Okay, and that will be step 5. All right. So here's an example. So like I said, number 1, estimate the annual gross income. So let's say it's 5,000 per month in rent, and we have an additional 600 that comes from something. Okay, maybe our vending machine. Our business is not that great, so we only get 600 every month, every year, right? So remember, this is annual, so it's per year. So our gross income is 60,600. And then for number 2, we're using a 4% vacancy. And so every year we're estimating that we're going to lose 24 in vacancies. And so our effective gross income is 60,600 minus 2424, and that gives you 58,176. Right? Then step 3, expenses, taxes, utilities, landscaping, maintenance, property management, all of those things. In my example here, I'm estimating that all of those things come to 27,000. Okay? So then we subtract our 27,000 from 58,176, and that gives us 31,176. Okay? Then we take our NOI and we just keep it to the side. Now we need to figure out what the going capitalization rate is in that area. Now, let's just say that based on our market evaluation, right, we looked and saw what other people were selling for. We figured out that it was 10%. Okay, so that's what we're going to use in this example. So then we go down to step 5, and then we plug in the formula NOI divided by the rate, and that gives us the value of the property. Okay, NOI divided by rate gives us the value of the property. With the income approach, if you're going to work with investors or get into any type of commercial real estate, you really need to understand these calculations. And there are some more that you kind of get into if you go into that space. But this is like your baseline of where you need to start. All right. So, just real quickly, as we wrap up with time, just wanted to actually let's do one example here and then we'll summarize and be done for today. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the comments and such, and I'll be glad to help. All right, so on this example, the effective gross annual income for property is $127,000. Total expenses for this year are $58,700. What capitalization rate was used to obtain a valuation of $545,750? So, from the example, the gross effective annual income is 127. Okay. Expenses 58,700. All right. We don't know the NOI. We don't have the net operating income, but we have what we can use to solve for it, which is our expenses and our gross income. So we subtract those two numbers and that will give us our NOI. And then the question is, we have a value of 545,750. What's the cap rate? Okay, so on the screen there, I have this T bar. If it works for you, please use it. We're looking for the rate. We have the NOI, we have the value. So we divide the NOI by the value, and that gives us the rate. Okay, so in this example, our answer is B as in boy, which is 12.51%. Okay, so we have the value there in the box as 545,750. We have our income, we subtract our expenses and get our NOI. And then we divide our NOI by the value. All right. The other thing to note is that the NOI, if you wanted to actually pay more for property, okay, if you pay more for a property, you have a lesser rate of return. If you pay less for the property, you get a higher rate of return. So on the screen here, I have the same example, and I said, okay, what if we have a rate of 10.75 instead of the 12.51 that we used in our previous example, right? So what if we did that instead? And if you notice here, you see how the value went up? So it went up from 545,750, and then it went to 635, $348.84. Okay. So that kind of helps you realize that, okay, if your client wants to get more of a return on their money, they have to pay less for the property. Okay. But if they pay more, that means their return will be less. All right. Um, and so that's about all I have for today. Earlier I was talking and I didn't realize my audio was muted, and so I was just talking to myself. And what I was trying to show you guys is what I was trying to show you guys was oh sorry, I was trying to show you guys the CE shop because they have a prepping tool. Okay, so I was trying to show you guys that, and I just was talking to myself that whole time. So I apologize. So I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to drop the link in the chat and I'll just show that to you guys as well. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, so let me show it to you guys. All right, so this is the CE shop. So if you use that link, it brings you here. Sorry, it brings you here. Okay. Now, if you want to take the course, if you have someone who wants to take the course, this is where they will come. There are some discounts with Halloween. Actually, I have another discount in a few days too. But this is the cost, and they tell you all that's included, right? They have a pass guarantee for most of their products. And I found out about them because my brokerage partners with them, and I have CEs coming up. I have to do some continuing education, and so I will be using them for my continuing education. So then, if you go up here to exam prep and pick Illinois, okay, they're in so many other states as well. This is their exam prep. You could do a free assessment just to kind of see where you are and see if it's something that you want to get into. They also have a free trial. I want to say, I did see something about a free trial. So if you add this to your cart, I think there's a free trial somewhere. And so you could test it out for yourself, see if it's something that you know would work for you. The price is comparable, and like I said, they have that price pass guarantee where they're doing their best to make sure that you're going to pass the exam. Okay, so you can come on here and read more about this. I will add it to the description of this video so that anyone who's watching this afterwards can come here and look. And always, if you have someone that's trying to take the exam or something like that, or take the course, because most of you have already registered for the course. If you have someone who's trying to take the course, you could give them this link too, because they'll get a discount if they use the promo code. Right, so the promo code here is prep25. And every now and then they send me different other promo codes with more of a discount. So you feel free to reach out to me, and if there's a more of a discount, I'll be sure to share that as well. All right. So with that, we've come to the end of today's lesson. I hope this was beneficial to you. It's always my goal to provide as much value as I can. As always, let me know in the description if you have additional questions about this appraisal process. Don't forget the list of things I told you guys to review as well, right? I didn't go over all of them because we don't have time to go over it all, but please review that list, and especially the ones that I highlighted to you guys. Those are the main ones that they sometimes ask about on the exam. Okay. And yeah, that's about it for today, guys. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy the rest of this warm day, and as we get ready for fall and all of those, I don't want to say the S word and all those things, but enjoy this warmer day, and best wishes on studying for the exam and all of those things. And feel free to reach out with questions and stuff like that, and I'll always be glad to help. All right, take care, everybody.